This is day 4 of my 7-day Christmas card series, and I'm beginning here today with a piece of patterned paper. This is by Teresa Collins from a collection called Christmas Cottage, and I've cut it into a rectangular size for one of my layers, and I'm distressing the edges of this using a Prima distress tool. Next, I'm going to layer the piece of patterned paper on top of a piece of basil cardstock in the colour Vanilla, and I've used sellotape brand double-sided tape to attach it. This is a digital image that I downloaded from Etsy. I've had this in my collection a few years, so I'm not entirely sure of the seller, but it was a sheet of digital ATC images. Again, I'm using the Prima distressing tool around the edges, and I'm going to layer this onto another sheet of the Vanilla basil cardstock. This is a die cut by Memory Box called Frostyville Border, and I've cut this from Ivory Linen Effect cardstock. I'm going to attach it to my card using Zig 2-way glue. The next step is to attach my digital image, and I've chosen to apply this using some foam tape so that it adds some dimension to the card. This is a piece of white coloured seam binding which I purchased from Orchid Crafts. I'm going to change the colour of this using some distress ink in Victorian Velvet, which I've applied to my craft mat and diluted using some water so that the colour absorbs evenly. In addition to the pink coloured seam binding that I'm going to add to my card, I've also chosen to add some cream coloured lace, and I'm attaching this by folding it over the back and using some double-sided tape. And now I'm attaching the piece of pink coloured seam binding, and I'm overlapping this slightly with the lace, and then I take a second piece of the seam binding and I'm going to use this to tie a bow around both of those pieces. Next, I'm taking a die by Cheery, which is of various different snowflakes, and I've cut these out of the same ivory coloured linen effect cardstock that I used for the Frostyville border. I'm just placing them around the card where I feel it needs a little more interest. Again, I'm using the Zig 2-way glue to attach these. Now I'm adding a final layer at the back of the card, and this is the linen effect cardstock again, so it matches the other elements of the card, and I'm using the sellotape brand double-sided tape to apply it with. As a finishing touch to my card, I've chosen to add some self-adhesive pearls in ivory. These are by Wild Orchid Crafts. For my card base, I've chosen my usual 350 GSM smooth white cardstock, and the reverse is stamped with my Judekin stamp. As always, details of that will be in the video description. I'm attaching my design using Sellotape brand double-sided tape, and now I'm going to work on the insert. For this, I've chosen a Spellbinders die. This is Labels 4, and I'm using the Victorian Velvet colour, which I'm applying to the edges so that it matches the front of the card, and for this application I'm using Ranger cut and dry foam. Next, I decide to add some stamping to my insert, so for this I've chosen a stamp set by Rubber Stamp Tapestry, and from this set I've selected 2 different size snowflakes, which I'm going to stamp using Distress ink in Victorian Velvet, and this is so that it will match the snowflakes that are on the front of the card. To fill in some of the spaces around the snowflakes, I'm using my Stampin' Up! Tiny Splatters stamp, also using the Distress ink in Victorian Velvet. Now I'm using a sentiment from a Penny Black stamp set, and I'm stamping this using VersaFine ink in Onyx Black. Once I've done this, I decide that I want to add some grey colour to the insert so that it matches the same grey that is featured on the digital image on the front of the card. So I've chosen a StazOn ink in Dove Grey, and to begin with I sponge this around the edges using a piece of Ranger cut and dry foam, and then I also add some tiny splatters to the insert using the Stampin' Up! Stamp. The last step in today's project is to attach my insert, and then the card is complete. I hope you enjoyed watching day 4 of my 7-day series, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. As usual, there is a link in the video description to the full product list as well as my social media sites.